Good morning, Queensway. For those of you that don't know me or are visiting online, my name is Dave, and I'm one of the volunteer preachers for our church during this interim period between permanent senior pastors. And I hope that our sermon series that we've been in, the Build series, has been a challenge for everyone, because it's been for me, also as one preparing sermons. God is building something new. Uh-oh. So we've been looking at the book of Ezra/Nehemiah and to see what God builds into the hearts of his people whenever he goes on one of these building projects. And so far, we've uncovered that he builds a desire to pray, a desire for his word, a desire for worship, a desire for community. And this morning, we're going to see that what he builds into the heart of his people is a desire for justice. For justice. We're going to be talking about Nehemiah chapter 5 this morning. That was just read by Amanda. And I have entitled our sermon this morning, When Legal Rights Deal Mortal Blows. So a little background to help set the stage, and then I'll do a paraphrase of our passage. First, the book of Ezra and Nehemiah in our Bibles is 2 books, but in the Hebrew text, it's actually just one long book. It covers a history from 538 BC to 433, all right? So this is the span that this book covers, 105 years. It covers 6 Persian kings, as far as the timeline is concerned. Think of it like reaching back to World War I. To today, okay? So if we went back to World War I to today and we thought about all the governors and changes of leadership and different things that's happened in our economy, and so this is what's being scooped up and covered by the Ezra-Nehemiah journey. Over those 105 years, there were 3 aliyahs. It's a Hebrew word. It means rise up, ascend. And it's the word symbolized to describe the exiles in Babylon returning to Jerusalem. God is rising them up again to their former dignity and to their future glory. He's rising them up, Aliyah. These 3 waves of Babylonian exiles occurred, one under Zerubbabel, one under Ezra, and one under Nehemiah, as the timeline points out. What's not always appreciated and understood about these returning exiles is that they were financially loaded. Loaded. All right? We are talking about a grotesque amount of wealth that came with them, that they brought to the decimated Jerusalem economy. And I've provided for you the scriptures for those of you that would like to go back and try to actually calculate just how much wealth did they bring with them. All right, from Babylon into flattened Jerusalem. The exiles themselves were the equivalent of George Bush's $1 trillion stimulus package in the 2008 recession, if you recall. Right? One of the major uses of the foreign aid money was to buy the Jews who had fallen into slavery back, to buy them back, and to bring them home as free men and free women. You can call it the redemption fund, right? 100 years, 105 years worth of redeeming debts and freeing Jewish slaves from foreign masters. That was what was going on with this wealth. So the returning exiles ended up being composed of 2 kind of groups of people, the redeemers and all those who got redeemed, right? The benefactors of this. And it was a major growth in population at both the top end and the bottom end of the economy, right? The top end and the bottom end got a huge boost over these 105 years. That's the first bit of background. Now the second, which is this, about the law of Moses and economics. All right? First off, lifting people out of poverty was not charity. It wasn't charity. It was an obligation. It was a legislated right of the poor to have access to the capital necessary to dig themselves out of their trouble. Legislated right. It's not charity. Second, interest on loans to the poor was totally forbidden. Illegal to charge interest on a loan to the poor. However, pledges against loans, collateral, was legal. And it actually makes sense. If you're trying to rebuild the dignity of the impoverished person at the same time as their net worth, being a constant receiver of charity is really demeaning. It really is. So rebuilding your dignity, being able to put collateral aside and paying back your debt, this is part of rebuilding their own dignity. It could be a household item, like a cloak. It could be the house itself. It could be your land. And in some cases, it could be free labor. Yourself, your own labor, or depending on the level of debt you've got, it might be the labor of your own children that you have to pledge against this loan that you're about to take. The most common way to repay an interest-free loan would be either the skim off the top of the harvest, right? So you gave me the loan, I planted it, and up came the... And so I'm going to give you the skim off the top from the harvest and start repaying my loan, which was calculated at a rate of 12% per year, known as the 100th portion. We see that pick up in our text here. Or working it off as just free labor. Those were the two ways that most of these loans got paid off. That we call today indentured servitude. That'd be our word for it. Now, some of you no doubt are already anticipating how this pledge system, it's meant to be good, could be exploited legally. More on that to come in Nehemiah chapter 5. All right? Then finally, interest on foreign loans, interest on commercial loans with merchants and traders, foreigners that came to conduct commerce in Israel. That was perfectly legal also, and appropriate. They were borrowing money to make money, so yeah, interest fits. All right, so remember, if you break a pledge, so you've put like your cloak for collateral on a loan, but then you couldn't cover the loan. So now you got to like get another thing to pledge. All right, my mortgage deed, my land deed. And if you just keep on missing your loans, you have to ratchet up your pledge higher and higher and higher to get more money. Okay? So broken pledge after broken pledge after broken pledge would leave someone ultimately with no cloak, no land, no right to his or her own earnings, and eventually no sons or daughters either. Right? This rolling cascade of pledge on pledge on pledge of I can't hit the loan, could turn this into this. Now, the law of Moses anticipated this, and it had the ultimate poverty breaker. All right? The ultimate poverty breaker in the law of Moses, and it's called the year of Jubilee. Every 50 years, no matter what, in your pledge cycle and missed debts and all that, no matter what, every 50 years, Israel hit the reset button. All loans dissolved. All pledges erased. All lands restored to the original ancestral allotment. Start over, says Yahweh, and do better this time. Right? Once in every lifetime, you would experience the year of Jubilee, the big reboot. Now, this system had a vulnerability. It only worked in a closed system. If someone became an indentured servant to, say, a Persian or a Babylonian, Israel's Jubilee had no binding force whatsoever on them. Why would a Persian who now owns you as a slave feel bound to free you because Israel happens to have a Jubilee in their cycle? He wouldn't. All right? And this is the main reason why in Old Testament we see mixed marriages with foreigners as being such a threat and the need to be eliminated. Redeeming a son or a daughter of Israel from a foreign master was really hard and really expensive. Okay? Really hard. The other thing that we can't forget is that the 12 tribes of Israel never actually owned their own land. Yahweh was really clear that he retains ownership of Israel's land and that he also retains ownership of Israel's people. And that this fundamental act of breaking the people free from slavery, which he did in Egypt, delivering them from their captivity, that's what he's all about. And he really hates when he sees them going back into slavery again. Like, what did I do all that for if you're just going to, right? Like pet peeve of God's. So he's built into the law anti-poverty and an anti-slavery feature. That you'll read in Leviticus 25, maybe the most least read book in the entire Bible, right? Leviticus. You don't like it, says God, take it up with him, right? If you mistreat the lowly of society long enough, God will evict you from his land. That's Leviticus 26. All right? So how it works in 25 and what he's going to do if you keep on offending him in 26. And it turned out that's exactly what happened. All right, there's all of our background. So to our story in Nehemiah 5. All right, so at this point, Nehemiah's been in Jerusalem for a grand total, right, of 3 weeks. 20 days, roughly, he's been here. 50% of the wall in the building project is already done. That is incredible. In the first 20 days, he got half the wall built. The external threat of surrounding nations attacking is now really quite under control, greatly diminished. These partial walls are good enough that we can probably hold off a raid. So we're not really feeling that serious threat anymore, and there's now space for an internal dilemma to crop up, and it did. There is not enough food, enough money, and way too many mouths to feed, right? It rose up. Now, this wasn't a new problem. This had been a systemic problem for decades, probably centuries. But now, it's Nehemiah's problem. Most new managers, I've been one, get about 90 days before they have to start fixing the mess that their predecessors left them, right? Nehemiah got 3 weeks. That's what he got. So the pressure came. Here we are. We're in the middle of July. It's a drought, bone dry, which happens in agrarian cultures. And the taxes to the Persian Commonwealth, that foreign government, are due in about October, right? After the harvest. Once the harvest comes in, Persians take their tax. So we're in July, it's a drought, and we got Persian taxes due in a couple of months. And we're staring at our fields, and we can already tell that this crop is not looking good. And if we keep working on that darn wall that we have to build, by the time October comes, we won't even get this measly crop off the fields. So that's kind of the setup here of where's this tension coming from in chapter 5 of Nehemiah. All right, how about all the characters that are involved in this story? Well, the characters in this story, Nehemiah chapter 2 actually helps us understand that the exile that happened 160 years ago didn't deport everyone. The lands were not emptied. Only the best were taken away to Babylon. And so if you fast forward to now, which Nehemiah chapter 2 does for us, we get these groupings of who were left behind. We get the nobles. We get the officials. We get the priests. And then the rest, right? All the common people. We also get told that there's these foreign adversaries by the name of Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem. And they have got an interest in maintaining the status quo. They love the pathetic, depressed state of Jerusalem and are going to do everything possible to keep them down. As I mentioned earlier, though, in addition to these 4 groups of Jewish people that were already in Jerusalem before Nehemiah ever arrived, there are now the returning exiles themselves. And remember, they broke up into 2 groups. We have got the redeemers, these wealthy exiles, and the redeemed, utterly poor, net worth 0. All right? And then, finally, the underplayed, not really mentioned, but extremely important Persian military escort to Nehemiah. When he came with an army. All right? Now, for most of the book of Nehemiah, the nobles and the officials are cast as the local bad guys. Meanwhile, these redeemers that came with Nehemiah are cast as the local good guys. And the Persian military escort that I just finished mentioned is the silent, coercive muscle behind Nehemiah that makes him untouchable to the bad guys and gives him the space that he needs to establish himself as Persia's governor, appointed governor of Yehud, Jerusalem. All right? So, the issues. 3 complaints come forward from the common people and the redeemed people. Okay? They have a similar issue. They come forward, they bring their complaints. Here they are. First, there's just too many mouths to feed. Okay? Not enough grain. Second, they're mortgaging their land. Land and home in order to buy this grain to survive. Right? So now they're overextended. They had to liquidate just to get the food, which causes the real scare because in October, Persian taxes are due. We're overextended. We got nothing left to lean on here. And out comes the 3rd complaint. All right? So here they are. They're saying, here's the problem, Nehemiah. My projected revenue sitting out there in that field, thanks to this drought, stinks. It's looking awful. Right? My futures aren't looking good on the field. And the nobles and the officials, well, they can see the fields as well as I can. So they know it. So they're already calling in their loans. The ones that we just secured to get the food. Right? So they're calling it in. Conveniently before the income tax to Persia is due in October. Which I can't cover. I can't cover the loan. I'm overextended. So now I am fresh out of things to pledge. No collateral that I can give to cover the Persian tax, except the servitude of my own children. It's all I got left. And you know, this isn't the first year that this has happened, Nehemiah. Sometimes the nobles and the officials keep our children themselves, let them earn off the debt, and then they give them back to us. Sometimes that happens. But we got to tell you, there are other times that the officials are selling our children back to the foreigners. So you the redeemers, have just waltzed in and redeemed many of our kinsmen these last 105 years. Thank you for that, by the way. Thank you for rescuing our children. We got to tell you, the nobles and officials are actually just putting them right back into servitude, making you buy them again. Here, let me show you Johnny. Let me show you Johnny. Do you know here's Johnny. Do you know you've bought back Johnny's freedom 3 times now? There he is. This has been going on for a long time, Nehemiah. I know you've only been here 20 days, but this is a problem. Now, the thing is, we know that this is legal. What's going on here is legal. It's It's pledges on loans and defaulting pledges and escalating pledges. This is Torah observant. It's legal. But this just isn't right. It's wrong. It's wrong. So Nehemiah's reaction after finding out that he's bought back Johnny 3 times, and that we free them and then they just send them right back in, and then we have to buy them back again, and this thing just keeps going. It makes him furious, right? Understandably. He's angry. These accusations turn out to be correct. Then the internal corruption here presents a way bigger threat to the people than the external enemies with their swords and shields. Okay? This vicious cycle, it's got to stop. So he cools down, right? He does his research, and he devises a solution. A short step back, emphasis on short, is very important. It's time to talk. Daddy calls a family meeting. Come on now, we're on the couch. We're going to have a conversation. He brings everyone together. He puts the Persian military escort behind him on full display, and he says nothing about them. He just leaves them there as a prop. He calls forward the nobles and the officials. He plasters them. Right? He lays out the accusation and he renders them totally silent. They're found guilty. Not guilty of committing something illegal. No, something far worse. They're guilty of committing an injustice. And that's what he nails them with. One that the law allows. Right? Now I love what the text says at this point. Right after Nehemiah's opening charge. Right? The nobles and the officials kept quiet because they had nothing to say. So I continued. Right? The chastisement is about to turn into a lecture. Right? So here he goes, right? What you are doing is not right. Couldn't be any plainer than that. He didn't say what you are doing is not legal. You see the distinction here. What they were doing was perfectly legal. What you are doing is not right. Shouldn't you walk in the fear of our God to avoid the reproach of our Gentile enemies? Now, what you might not know is that this second part, shouldn't you walk in the fear, and on and on. Right? This is formula. This is technical language. This is a sentence that he's directly lifted out of Torah, specifically Leviticus 25 and 26, for those of you who want to run home and do the background reading after church today. Right? He did a whoop, he just pulled it right out of Torah and he hit him with it. This was Nehemiah's way of saying, okay, you know where we are, right? Nobles, officials, you know where we are? No? Oh, okay. All right, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go home, and you're going to read Leviticus 25 and 26, and then you're going to come back here, and we're going to have a little talk about it. That's where we are. So now, we're at the point where Nehemiah moves to the solution for this injustice. And it turns out to be the very solution that was given in Leviticus 25. Nehemiah goes as far as his power would enable him. He couldn't do anything about the Persian king, about the current geopolitical reality. He couldn't do anything about the drought and the famine. All above his pay grade, his power couldn't reach. But as far as his power could reach, he did. All right? And here are the 2 things that he did. Right off the bat, he declared an emergency year of Jubilee. He reset the scales. We're starting over. We're all at 0 right now. All debts canceled, all pledged, all. And the second thing he did was he eliminated their municipal tax. At his own expense, I might add. Right? It was the only tax he actually could control, and so he lifted it. It's the only one he had. Now, in the long term, this did not fix the systemic problem. The problem was bigger than him. But that didn't stop him from doing everything in his power to fight the injustice that was right under his nose. And that actually is the point and the application of the narrative for us this morning. Nehemiah's reaction to injustice is what we're looking to learn from together. Now, a quick note on the biblical definition of justice. And if I had a two-part sermon, I'd have dedicated a whole sermon to this one. But I just have to give you the end of it. From God's point of view, when has justice been served? That's the question, right? From God's point of view, when has justice been served? You see, we live in the developed West. And we're actually a lot closer, if we're trying to figure out which characters are we like in the story, we're a lot closer to being the nobles and the officials than anyone else in this story. Okay? We live in the developed West, and like the nobles and the officials in our story today, we have inherited the traditions of our parents and our land. We live in a liberal democracy, free market, capitalistic society. It's where we live. The pervasive idea about justice in our society is captured by this sentence. Justice is when you get exactly what you deserve. Welcome to the West. Society tells us that justice has been served when the law has been upheld and when the natural consequences for your choices and actions are felt. Karma, basically. Right? That's justice. And helping the disadvantaged is a charitable act. Here we are. But this is not how the Creator God sees justice. And I'm sorry to say that just because we are law-abiding citizens that operate according to the customs of our economy doesn't mean that we aren't causing injustice. For God, justice is not a function of choices and consequences. Justice, from God's point of view, is a function of original design, worth, and destiny. Justice is when the object is being treated according to its inherent worth. That's biblical. When it is being demeaned and not being treated according to its worth, that is injustice. Nature has inherent worth given to it by the Creator, and humans have big worth given to it, inherent from the Creator. We are the creation that Jesus himself died for in order to rescue. Right? That's a pretty high worth. We're the creation charged with the duties of being fruitful and multiplying, filling, subduing, and governing the entire earth and everything in it. And ultimately, we're the creation that when glorified in the age to come, will rise to the second highest rank in all of the cosmos, as we will rule and judge even the angels themselves. So, when we participate in breaking the cycle of poverty, in dignifying the undignified, in raising up the lowly and the disadvantaged, we're not committing charity. This is not an act of charity. It's an act of justice. I, the Lord of wind and flame, I will tend the poor and lame. I will send a feast for them. My hand will save. Finest bread I will provide till their hearts be satisfied. I will give my life to them. Whom shall I send? Here I am, Lord. We're to mimic God. Mimic him. and to restore according to the inherent worth, people and nature. All right, let's recall the charge that the people laid against the nobles and the officials, right? Here's the charge. You'll see, again, that the charge is not that the officials were breaking the law, because they didn't break the law. They were taking pledge loans, followed the law perfectly, to the letter. That's the problem. They followed it to the letter. This wasn't their beef. What they were saying to the nobles and the officials is that your legal rights are dealing us mortal blows. Injustice was the complaint. So how does God go about building into our hearts a hunger for justice, a hunger for putting all things right? How does God do that? Because we know my sermon can't do that. Well, I think we can expect to go through the same 4 stages that Nehemiah went through. Stage 1. He felt it. He felt it. It has to start here. I keep myself ignorant of all sorts of injustices just so that I won't feel it. My own kids expose me. The panhandler comes up to my window at a red light, and I choose not to even look him in the eye. And then my kid says, "Dad, what's that man doing?" Guilty. Second thing he did was he thought about it. First he felt it, and then he thought about it. Now, justice is usually complex. It's usually interrelated. It's usually a whole slew of things. So stepping back and doing a little thinking helps us discern what action we can take that will not actually make things worse. But there are 2 dangers on this one. And the first one, well, I guess we could call analysis paralysis, right? Where we're trying to understand the dilemma so much that we don't actually end up doing anything. God expects action and not contemplation in this particular category. But the second issue, the risk, is my personal Achilles heel. This is the one I deploy the most. I reverse the order. You can see the first one is you need to feel it. That's heart. Then you need to think about it. That's head. And it's got to be done in that order. First heart, then head. What do? Flip them. I approach injustice with first head. You want to know why? I deploy my head as a defense mechanism so that I don't feel the heart. Right? So, here comes the panhandler, right, asking for their money. And what do? Well, son, what he's going to do with that money, right? Really, we're not actually helping him, son. The problem with that particular gentleman is probably a lot more than today's Tim Hortons, gift card. Right? Rationalize, head. Why? So that I don't feel it. That's what I'm doing. Right? That's what I'm doing. Now, we are supposed to think about it, but after we've felt it. After we've felt it. Third, Nehemiah did something about it. Intervene as far as your power and your influence will allow you. Don't be discouraged that you're small and your limited interventions, you only got so much. Don't be discouraged that what you've got won't actually solve the bigger systemic problem. Right? That's God's province. Stay out of there. Thinking too much in that space will just depress you back into inaction. And then finally, he lived it. He lived it. Right? Nehemiah led by example and made a sacrificial, permanent change in his lifestyle according to his newfound convictions. So our personal application this morning is to consider what stage are we at in our personal lives and our personal fights against injustice. Now, I've had the privilege of getting to know a lot of you these past 3 years, and I do have to say, this is something, actually, we've got a lot of justice warriors in this congregation. A lot of you do have a heart for justice. A lot of you have felt it, thought about it, done something about it, and changed your life accordingly. Right? To this, God says, well done, my good and faithful servants. But I actually think he's asking a little something more from us this morning. I think he's asking us to take a promotion. We're good at it. It's time for a promotion. Right? This is to go on to our own aliyah and to rise up and come together. In addition to our fights against injustice that you are already doing, as many ones out there, individuals, in our private ministries, in our individual lives. I think God's calling us to collect, to band together, and to fight a different level of injustice. Not as many ones, but rather as one. So let me ask a new question. What stage are we at? 4 stages, right? Feel it, think about it, do something about it, live it, right? 4 stages. What stage are we at as a church body when it comes to fighting, collectively fighting, injustice as a team effort here in Henderson Survey? I actually think we're in Nehemiah chapter 5, we're at verse 1. I don't actually think we've yet become aware of the great outcry of Henderson Survey. What injustice plagues this community that we are planted in? So, because we aren't quite yet aware of it, I don't think we've even felt it yet. Right? That's where I think we are, right at the beginning. We have to seek out these answers, because I know that once we take the time to become aware of it, I know this church, I've gotten to know you, we will feel it. We will band together, and we will do something about it. We will. And that will permanently change how this church lives in this community. If we do the concrete work of tracking down, hunting down the injustices of our community, I think what we'll find is great clarity in what God would have us do as a church. You know what you call that? That's a purpose. We'll have a purpose. And that's something that we can build on. Amen.